Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm taking a look at Wasp. Wasp, similar to Ant-Man, got a great upgrade in that her PvE damage increased drastically and that she is usable throughout most of the content. However, again, similar to Ant-Man, it seems like the devs kind of missed the mark because even though the character is a lot better now, she doesn't really fill any kind of niche or satisfy any kind of requirement or restriction to make the character a lot more valuable. Basically what I'm saying is that even though the character is a lot better, if you're not really going to be using her in any kind of targeted content, then what's really the point of getting the new uniform? This is another reason why I'm kind of let down by this update, because they easily could have made Ant-Man and Wasp both more useful in specific game content just by adding some specific effects, but they kind of didn't do that and just gave them a damage increase, which makes them better but doesn't really make them more useful. I'll mention some ways that I think the update could have been improved and how both of these characters could have actually been great for the game at the end of the video. But for now, I'll just cover how a Wasp performs with the new uniform and how you can use her in PvE and to some degree in PvP. Don't get me wrong, with the new uniform, Wasp becomes substantially better and is basically a playable character now. They gave her a ton of effects, including 9 seconds of invincible, damage accumulation for damage dealt, a damage immunity bubble, all defense down that ignores immunity, chain hit damage, a bunch of different damage buffs, and even paralysis across 3 skills, including on the damage immunity bubble, meaning that you can effectively perma-lock down the boss. With all those damage increases, I was easily able to take out stage 99 of Thanos with no damage proc in about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And because of our lockdown and that all defense down that scales up by 10% up to that maximum 50%, I was able to take out Obsidian in about 1 minute and 15 seconds. Once I awakened and transcended the character, I was able to shave off about 40 seconds versus Thanos and around 35 seconds versus Obsidian. If you were wondering, those clear times are pretty crazy for World Boss Ultimate, since I'm basically able to do Thanos in under 2 minutes and Obsidian in under 60 seconds or around 40 seconds with no damage proc. That solid damage carries over into World Boss Legend, as I was able to do stage 9 of Knull with no damage, leadership, or support in basically 2 minutes, which means that the character is really solid for PvE. To take it a bit further, I also went into stage 29 of Knull, again with no damage proc, leadership, or support, and I was almost able to complete the first phase in about 2 minutes. I was about 20 seconds short, meaning that if I improved the build a little bit and maybe had a tighter rotation, she could have completed this with no additional help. You can see that the damage is still decent at higher stages, since I went to a stage 34, and again I was almost able to complete the stage with no damage proc. I did add in some supports, but I was about 3 bars short of finishing it before time ran out. But again, if I had a little bit of a better build and a tighter rotation or more experience using it, then I'm pretty sure I would have been able to clear it. The point of these tests is to show that her damage doesn't completely fall off at higher stages, because she does get about 70% ignore dodge from her awakening skill. There is a bit of downtime, about 20 seconds, where you don't have this buff, so when you get to the really higher stages, you really need supports and strikers that give you that ignore dodge, but otherwise her damage is pretty solid, and the effects that she has pretty much make up for the most of it. If you want to use the character specifically for PvE, you can obviously make a CTP of Rage work. However, I opted to try out a CTP of Destruction to get that 100% ignore dodge or whatever it is from the top proc when you have the Mighty option, so it kind of makes up for that downtime of her awakening skill not giving the ignore dodge, and because the character is pretty proc friendly but takes a little bit of practice to not miss your procs. So I would probably recommend a CTP of Energy or a Destruction first, especially because a Destruction also gives you dual usability in PvP as well. However, if you don't really want to worry about proccing, then obviously a CTP of Rage is your best option there. In terms of the rotation to use, the one that I would recommend is to do a 3, delay cancel slightly. You wait till you just start seeing the tornado animation appear, and then you do 4 cancel 5. You can also do a delay cancel of the second skill first, So you do it when the kind of yellow bubble appears. It won't activate your damage proc, but it will provide you some additional survival by giving you the damage immunity bubble. Then from there, you just go back into that rotation that I mentioned. When you have the awakening skill, you basically do the same rotation. You would do a 3 delay cancel and then do 6 cancel, 4 cancel, 5, with the 5th skill obviously being the skill that you want to proc on. As you can see from this test, with no damage proc at this point in time, I was able to complete the first phase within about a minute and 40 seconds, meaning that she should have been able to complete the fight entirely for the combat day. Although the character won't really be used in Alliance Battle Extreme due to not really filling any kind of restrictions, I also tested her there and she was able to score around 9.1 million with Nick Fury leadership and a mighty CTP of destruction, meaning that with a CTP of rage, she should have been able to hit somewhere above 10 million. Wasp's usability in PvP is where I'm a little bit let down by the character. She had the potential to be one of the top or best supports in the game in PvP, similar to Colossus and to a lesser extent Shuri. But similar to Ant-Man, they didn't really give her the tools to perform that top tier support function, and they didn't give her the essential effects needed to be a top tier threat as a standalone either, such as iframe ignore or super guard break. As you saw in the first clip, I was able to take out Sentry, and I actually did 2 tests with an invincible obelisk. However, because she gets 9 seconds of invincible on her 5th skill, it doesn't really do much for her, and she does end up struggling versus opponents that have invincible in their kit, and she doesn't have penetration. This is why I opted to try out a mighty CTP of destruction, because it gives her the penetration needed to take out some of the higher level metas that have invincible in their kit, and also because her survival is already pretty good with that damage immunity bubble that she gets from her 2nd skill and that the AI opens with. After that, she usually goes into the 5th skill, which gives her 9 seconds of invincible and some healing. So the survival, I would say, isn't necessarily the issue if you want to use her as a standalone. It's more so getting the damage to take out the opponent before they start getting all of their buffs up and getting any potential iframe ignores to hit you. You can also potentially use a CTP of regen to try and survive up till that awakening skill that does give you penetration. However, if you go that route, you likely won't be able to take out some potentially higher metas by getting a good proc and penetration from the destruction instead. The other thing I noticed is that Wasp tends to move around a lot in her skills, very similar to Ant-Man. So if you have a strike effect on your mighty CTP of destruction, you should be able to proc that top effect and get use out of the ignore dodge, even though the boss damage will obviously be useless in PvP. If you notice from these last 4 clips, I do end up activating that top proc in some of the fights, and the additional penetration does allow me to take out some of the top metas, even if it is just for 1 life. In Alliance Conquest, I didn't really get a chance to test her out versus top metas last week, but this week I did get a fight in versus all combat characters, and because the opponent didn't use a debuff leadership and she has all those paralysis effects, she was easily able to take out the team just by herself. I think she's kind of going to struggle versus metas by herself, so if you're planning on using her for that, a CTP of Insight would probably be better, and using her with meta characters on your own team. However, if you are planning to target characters that aren't as high up on the meta tier list, then using her by herself with a destruction should work out pretty well. So if you do end up getting this uniform, I would probably say that a mighty CTP destruction would give you the most value, since you can use her in PvE and get some good use in PvP. However, in PvP specifically, maybe a CTP of Insight might be your best bet if you try to use her with some top metas and make use of that debuff passive that she has. And this part kind of ties back into the beginning of the video, in that if you do use the character just as a support, then the uniform doesn't really add much value to her, and you don't really need the uniform for her support function. This is why I'm kind of disappointed with this upgrade, because they easily could have upgraded her support function by giving a lot more health as opposed to just a little bit more and that's it, or possibly even added some mitigation or some chain hit or additional damage, so that she functions more similarly to Agent Venom, where he provides an amazing passive in both PvE and PvP, and the character is also solid standalone. Wasp, on the other hand, basically just got a damage increase and didn't really get much improvement as a standalone character in PvP. They didn't give her iframe ignore, they didn't give her super guard break, or even penetration in her base kit outside of her awakening skill. On the other hand, on her support side, they didn't really give her much of anything, so her support usage is basically the same as it was before. So it really leaves the character in a weird spot because the character has a debuff passive which you want to utilize in PvP. However, the new uniform doesn't add much to be able to fight the current metas, and her support function has barely changed. Imagine how great Wasp could have been as a support if she provided additional health and mitigation, as well as that debuff passive, and also functioned as a standalone character by having something like iframe ignore in her base kit, or possibly even in her artifact. They even could have done that with Ant-Man, added some iframe ignore or possibly some super guard break to make him more viable in PvP, considering he has that crazy guaranteed dodge as well as the built-in guard break immunity. And they could have even gone a step further and given Wasp the 70% increased damage only to Ant-Man to add some synergy with being able to use her in the leadership spot and providing a debuff to Ant-Man. It would have been a great PvP combo, but instead we just got a generic damage increase to both characters. So that's kind of my ranty review for Wasp and I guess to a lesser extent Ant-Man. They got awesome PvE upgrades, but they likely won't be used there, so what's really the point? As always, if you enjoyed the content, found it entertaining or useful, please consider liking so I know that you did, and subscribing if you want to see more like it. You could also consider sharing the video, it might help other people out, and it helps my channel grow. I always appreciate people taking the time to watch these, so thank you, but the video is now over.